And so what we're doing in this series is giving you a tool that hopefully you can use in little ways, make little movements to help connect with people and live a meaningful life. And I was praying this week for our church, and Jeremiah chapter 9 came to mind, and I wanted to share it with you tonight. You can put that slide up there. It reminds us of the importance of having confidence in God, but also humility as we think of ourselves. So this is what it says. This is what the Lord says. Let not the wise boast of their wisdom, or the strong boast in their strength, or the rich boast in their riches. But let the one who boasts boast about this, that they have the understanding to know me, that I am the Lord, who exercises kindness, justice, righteousness on earth. For in these I delight, declares the Lord. And so we've been praying that for you. Gene's got a great message. Humility is a huge part of it. And so we hope that we're going to get an extra dose of it tonight. So Gene is back from Israel, all fired up, and we're glad to have him back.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Love the evening. And love all these new faces coming to celebrate their friends and family that are going to take the plunge. The good news is that we use a hot tub, and it's heating up. That's the good news. Okay. Still going to take a commitment to get in it, though. I'm just warning you right now. So many of you probably don't know this, but back in the day, I was a pretty serious slow pitch softball player before and even after Andrew and I moved out here to Boulder. We even had a cornerstone co-ed softball team for a few seasons. Let's hear it. I saw a couple of people here that were part of the team. Yes, there you go. And my softball claim to fame is that, because it's slow pitch, I don't know why, I could just see that ball so easily. And so I could basically place the ball anywhere in the outfield, which typically meant that I held that coveted cleanup fourth batting position. And if the first three batters got on base, there was pretty high probability that we were going to rack up some runs on the scoreboard. And I loved being the fourth batter. So we started our new home series 4 weeks ago. This is the fourth week. And so Aaron singled. Aaron actually was our leadoff speaker. Brian was on deck, and Megan was in the hole. And Aaron singled that first week when he unpackaged how the core idea of home is to be blessed, to be a blessing. And he did this by looking at the covenant that God made with Abraham. Brian also singled the second week, and he taught us how that idea of home is to have an open heart, open door and an open heart to bless others through hospitality. Megan loaded up the bases last week. Didn't she do an awesome job? And she taught us how the idea of home requires sacrifice, intentionality, and generosity through ownership. So now the bases are loaded, and I'm up to bat for the next 2 weeks. I'm hoping to clean up the bases by knocking this home run series out of the park. And I took the liberty to actually change the name of the series from Home Blessed to be a Blessing to Home Run, Batting to be a Blessing. Doesn't that just sound like more fun to you? Pretty corny, right? So this stupid idea popped into my head on that 11-hour flight from Tel Aviv to Newark, and it's been rattling around in my brain ever since. So I'm hoping that just by doing this, it's just gone. I can move on with my life. I don't have to up my meds. Okay, so I want to start tonight by asking you a question, and I'm serious about this question, okay? Are you happy? Yes. Oh, good. Glad to hear that. However, if you answered no to this question, congratulations, because you joined the 67% majority of Americans who said no to the same question in 2017. The Harris poll has been asking this question for the last 9 years, and it's been trending downward ever since. 2/3 of everyone in America say they are not happy with their lives, and according to an article written just last month on the subject of happiness, here's what it said. Income per capita in America has more than doubled since 1972, while happiness, also called subjective well-being, we actually have a better name for it, has been declining. A similar article last month asked the question, if it's true that happiness and money generally go hand in hand, then why are Americans less happy now that economic growth is robust and the unemployment rate has reached a historical low? So people are noticing, and they're writing about this phenomenon. We're a country that prides itself on pursuing happiness, aren't we? I mean, the pursuit of happiness is actually written into our Declaration of Independence. So it's not just a privilege to be happy, it's a right to be happy. And yet, America is only ranked 18 among the nations in terms of happiness levels, and those levels have been trending downward for the last decade. Depression and anxiety disorders have risen dramatically over the last 10 years. Suicide is at epidemic levels, especially for the population of teens and middle-aged adults who are discouraged with life. Statistically, every year, over 40,000 hopeless Americans take their lives, and worldwide that number is over 1 million. So the question is, are you happy? And according to statistics, at least 2/3 of everybody in this room will answer that question, no. And I'd like to suggest that maybe the real problem here is that instead of pursuing happiness, we ought to be pursuing meaning in our lives. And meaning is the subject of tonight's message, which comes from the letter M in the acronym that we've been using, HOME. We start hospitality, ownership, tonight's home. Meaning creates, in my mind, the ultimate reason why we would get out of bed in the morning and be excited for our day. It's the spark that ignites passion and purpose in our lives. It's the existential awareness that we are making a difference in the world, that our life counts for something. According to Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, happiness is largely a matter of satisfying immediate needs and wants. Meaning, by contrast, is about lifelong sense of purpose in life, especially by making positive contributions to the lives of others. Happiness is associated with taking. Meaning is associated with giving. And by the way, all these people I'm quoting tonight are really worth your reads, okay? In her best-selling book, The Power of Meaning, Crafting a Life That Matters, Emily Esfahani Smith says, meaning is about belonging to and serving something beyond yourself. It's about believing that your life matters and that it makes sense. And Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and author of the book Man's Search for Meaning, says, challenging the meaning of life is the truest expression of the state of being human. We all need an existential reason. Why do we exist? For getting out of our beds every morning. And meaning is what provides the catalyst in our lives to do just that. Pursuing happiness is not a sustainable endeavor. But pursuing meaning can provide a lifelong sense of satisfaction that transcends whatever might be taking place in your life, whether you're in a season of prosperity or a season of challenge. And so with these things in mind, I want to give what I call 3 stabilizing legs that create a solid foundation for meaning. Just like a stool needs at least 3 legs to be stable, these 3 legs create a stable foundation for meaning as well. And the first stabilizing leg for meaning is belonging. And belonging is about connection and responsibility. And listen, I'm not using this word belonging in kind of the psychological, emotional sense, okay? I'm doing it in a much more broader sense tonight, and that'll make sense to you in just a minute. Acts chapter 17, verse 26 says, from one man, God made all the nations, and that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their inhabitants. I love this, particularly the second half, because it says, look, I don't know if you know it or not, we say this a lot here, but we're all stuck in a story that God wrote. Have you ever thought about it that way? In Genesis 1:1, God pressed the button to an incredible story. It's been playing out ever since then the way he wrote it, and we're stuck in it. And we don't get to decide at what point of the story that we get to intersect with God's story. That's up to him. He determines the exact times that we're to live in the story. And not only that, you probably thought you made the choice to move to Colorado or to Boulder or Denver, but God thought about it before you did. That's what I love about this passage. But here's the thing. It says the word for man in this sentence is really the word blood. You know, translations, a lot of times they use words to make it so you can understand the passage better. But I prefer actually the literal word blood here rather than man, because it puts more of an emphasis on our relatedness or our connection to each other. We are all part of humanity, every one of us. We are all one blood. We're all God's children, which means we are all brothers and sisters. White, black, yellow, or brown, Jews, Christians, Muslims, Hindus, men, women, heterosexual, homosexual, Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, poor, rich, legal U.S. citizens, illegal foreign immigrants. We all come from one blood. We're all connected to each other. And so here's another question. Do you personally feel connected to the whole of humanity? When you see a homeless person, do you consider yourself related to that person? When you see a foreigner, do you consider yourself related to that person? When you see someone of a different faith, do you see yourself related to that person? It's kind of cool today. You know, lots of people, we can go online and we can do a family search, Ancestry.com or something like that. We can go back as far as we can find records. Today you can do a DNA testing to see what your ethnic origins are. But if you go back far enough, you're going to discover that we all come from the same blood. We all come from the same first man, and his name was Adam. The Hebrew word for man, the biblical Hebrew word for man is Adam. That's Adam's name, how you pronounce it in Hebrew, Adam. It's related to the Hebrew word for ground, Adamah, because Adam was made from the Adamah, from the ground, all right? Adamah, ground, is related to the Hebrew word for red, which is Adom, because the clay soil, the Adamah, was a rich red color, Adom. Adom, red, is related to the Hebrew word for blood, which is Dam, because red Adom is the color of the life-giving blood, Dam, flowing through Adam's veins. All these words are built on the same Hebrew word, same Hebrew three-letter root word. And we might all be different colors, different genders, different faiths, different lifestyles, but we all have, you cut yourself and bleed, and you'll see that you have red blood flowing through your veins, because we all come from the same blood. And the point I want to hit home, while the bases are still loaded, if I can say that, if you don't see yourself belonging to the whole of humanity, then you'll never see how you're connected to every person who comes across your path, or the familial or the humanitarian responsibility that you have to them. A responsibility before God to treat every one of his kids with dignity and respect, and especially the responsibility to care for all those who are less fortunate, at risk, marginalized, or abused. This is the radical nature of the Torah, the law that was first given to the Jewish people, carried forward in the New Testament for all of the followers of Rabbi Yeshua, Jesus, who was and is the living Torah. He came to earth to show us how to live it out. And what did he say? He said, "As I have loved you, now you go love one another." Last Thursday night, I hosted 12 people in my home who all come from either a Christian, Jewish, or Muslim background. And we've been meeting together for some time now. I've shared about this group in the past. And we come together, first of all, to develop a mutually respectful friendship, but also to partner together in helping to resolve, anyways, social justice issues around the world. And even though we all come from different ethnic and faith backgrounds, and we're very clear about maintaining those distinctions, all right? So this isn't about any kind of universalism. This is about building relationships and partnering together. Nevertheless, we all have a sense of belonging to the whole of humanity and to each other, and it's one of the most meaningful things that I've ever done in my life. Seriously, and it's one of the many things, and there are many things going on in my life right now, that gets me out of bed every morning. Belonging is about being keenly aware that we're connected to the whole of humanity and that we have a responsibility to all our brothers and sisters, not just the ones we feel more comfortable with, not just the ones who look and act and live and believe like us. And so wherever we are and whoever we bump into on this planet should be like bumping into a family member. And it carries with it the responsibility of showing dignity and respect and compassion and care. All too often, I'm sad to say, we Christians alienate or distance ourselves from certain parts of humanity, and we typically do this with an arrogant, condescending, holier-than-thou, adversary kind of posture. But as Acts 17:26 says, from one blood, God made all the nations. And when we start seeing ourselves connected and responsible to the whole of humanity, it opens the door to a deeper sense of meaning in our lives. After all, think about it. John 3:16, what does it say? God so loved part of the world? Just the ones he liked? No. He loved the whole world. And this is why he sent his son, Jesus, to die for us. Okay. By the way, next week is the letter E, and it's esteem, and I'm actually going to dial down on this first point even more. So if you didn't like what I just said, you're not going to like next week, okay? Just going to warn you right now. I think the Rockies have an early game, so. All right, the second leg of stability is purpose, and purpose is about gifting and stewardship. 1 Peter 4:10 says, each of you should use whatever gift you've received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. And let's leave this verse up on the screen for a while, okay? Thanks. Purpose is that unique thing that only you can bring to the table as you become more connected and feel more responsible to the whole of humanity. And here's the beauty. I love this passage if you really kind of dig it apart a little bit in 1 Peter 4:10. That Greek word for gift is where we get the word charisma. Charisma. And it's built from the same Greek word for God's grace in this sentence, which is charitos, right? Charisma, charitos, they're related. And so don't miss the remarkable implication of this passage. The charisma, the gift that is given to each one of us by God, is actually a portion of his grace in our lives. In other words, when God does a work of grace in our lives, that grace, whatever form it came in, is a free gift to us that we now have a stewardship to pass on to others. 1 Corinthians chapter 12 is a passage about spiritual gifts. We're told that no one person gets all of God's grace. No one person gets all of the gifts. Only Jesus has this exception. But as each of us stewards the unique portion of grace given to us, collectively we become what's called the body of Messiah, or the body of Christ. And it's as if Jesus himself is actually still here on earth doing those things through us. It's a remarkable model. 1 Corinthians 12:27 says, now you are the body of Christ, and each one of you are part of it. So yesterday, Andrea and I celebrated our 44th year of marriage. 44 years. Oh my gosh. Unfortunately, she was sick, and she's still sick. She wanted to be here tonight so badly. But She's got that stuff again. Anyways, most of you know our story. Early on in our marriage, we had a lot of trouble. In our 7th year of marriage, we separated, and we were separated for almost a year, and then we got back together. We found faith in God, and then he began to heal us, and then he healed our marriage. This is the gift of grace God has given us. What a gift. And if you ask me, what's the primary gift of grace God has given me to steward, I would say it's building bridges. My purpose in life is to build bridges of relationships. God built a bridge in my marriage, and I've been building bridges ever since. You know, it took me a while looking back to see that's what I've been doing for 30 years, 35 years. That's why I meet with a group of Jews and Christians and Muslims to build bridges. I was in Israel for a couple weeks recently, and I visited several of our ministry partners. We have amazing partners in Israel, and I'm so proud of the partners that we have. But I visited a new one, and last October, when I took a group to Israel on a tour, I had a couple of people come and speak to our group one evening. One was a man named Salim Manouar. He's a Palestinian Christian, and the other was a Messianic Jew named Lisa Loden, who both live in Israel. And maybe you don't know it, but you know this. You know that Israelis and Palestinians, there's a lot of bad blood between those two groups, right? Can't get them out of the headlines. What you don't know is that same bad blood, even worse blood, is between Palestinian Christians and Messianic Jews, all who have the same faith. And it's even worse because they read the scriptures about we should love one another, we should be getting along, we should be at peace with each other. But those tensions are still there. So Salim started an organization called Masalaha. Masalaha in Arabic means reconciliation. And that's what he does at a grassroots level. He builds bridges between Palestinian Christians and Messianic Jews. He and Lisa have written a book called Through My Enemy's Eyes, and it's just absolutely refreshing. And I can't wait for us to partner with him. By the way, he took me. We met, we had lunch, and he said, "Do you have your passport on you?" I said, "No." He goes, "Well, let's go anyway." So he took me. You need a passport to get into Bethlehem. But if you're with a Palestinian, it makes it a lot easier. We just waved, and I said, "Well, how am I going to get out?" He goes, "Same way we got in, hopefully." So you have to go through a checkpoint that's got walls to get into Bethlehem. And inside Bethlehem, there's walls within walls. There's one particular wall that's really high. I mean, I don't know, 30, 40 feet high. And it's got graffiti all on it. And it's kind of a famous wall now because it's the graffiti. A lot of the graffiti on it is done by a famous graffiti artist. You probably know him, named Banksy, right? Anybody know this famous artist? And next to, and it's just it's in a really, there's nothing there, other than like alleys and things like that. But next to it, there's this hotel that's become famous. He took me to the hotel. The hotel is called the Waldorf Hotel. The Waldorf Hotel. Not the Waldorf, the Waldorf Hotel. And inside the hotel, there's 9 rooms. It'll cost you at least $500 to $1,000 a night to stay in one of those rooms, but it's like a museum. But it's not a museum because it's done by creatives. It's actually, and it's not exhibits. I don't know how to describe it. It's an experience. And what you see is the Palestinian perspective of things. And I tell you, I just wept as I went through that. And I want to be more involved in building bridges between relationships. The governments are not going to get that job done. It's all going to happen at a grassroots level. And that's where I like to hang anyways, okay? I love building bridges because that's the work of grace in my life. Now, I know some of you Bible scholars are probably saying, wait a minute, Gene, I don't see the gift of building bridges as one of the list of gifts listed in the Bible. And I would say to you, get out of that box you're stuck in, okay? Is the range of God's grace limited in any way? Is God's work in your life restricted to some kind of a finite list? So often we create a theology or a system out of teachings in the Bible, and then that theology or system becomes the box that we jump into, and now we're stuck, where we're now closed off to anything that doesn't fit into that box, even if there are opposing or paradoxical teachings in the Bible. Let me give you one example, because I think this is important. It's a little off track, okay? Predestination and free will. The Bible teaches predestination and free will, and yet so many people get stuck in one of those boxes or the other, which often leads to a horrible division between relationships, sometimes splitting church, people starting churches. I remember years ago I had a guy call me and say, "Are you guys Calvinists there?" I go, "Seriously, that's your one big question?" And so I sent him to a church I knew that stuff was important to him. You do an honest reading of the Bible, you're going to see predestination is clearly taught. And then you go to the other passage and you will see clearly that free will is there. How do they work together? It's a paradox, right? God's not limited anyway. We are. So don't be a boxy, black and white Christian. Listen to this. Leave room for mystery. We're not supposed to have everything all tied up, real nice and clean, and get out in our book of apologetics and answer everything. Leave room for mystery and the reality that we are finite beings. We have limited knowledge. And listen to this. The various forms of God's grace in our lives is as diverse as the various forms of issues in our lives. Listen, I personally have had a lot of issues that transcend a lot of lists. But I've been a pastor for 30 years too, and I've seen, things that I go, wow, I hadn't seen that one before. But you know what I get to see is God's grace that shows up in the midst of those issues. He does a work of grace during those times. And when it comes to finding purpose in our lives, the big question that we should ask is, what work of grace has God done in our lives? Where has God worked grace into your life? Has God healed you or not healed you of something? Has he saved you or not saved you from something? Has he given you something? Has he taken away something? Has he taught you something? Has he revealed something to you? Good or challenging? These are all gifts of God's grace in your life. And when God makes a deposit of grace in your life, you now have a stewardship to administer that gift to others, and this is now your primary purpose in life. Doesn't mean it won't change at some point, but that's it for now. Mine is building bridges. What's yours? And so belonging is about being connected and responsible for the whole of humanity. Purpose is about the stewardship of that unique gift of grace that God has given us. And then that third leg of stability is faith. And faith is about hope and storytelling. Hebrews 11, 1 through 2 says, now faith is confidence in what we hope for, assurance about what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. Hebrews chapter 11, if you've never read it, is often called the heroes of the faith chapter because it details the lives of several men and women in the Bible who lived passionately and radically and purposefully for God. And yet every one of those men and women listed in this chapter died without receiving the full promises of God. Hebrews 11:13 says, all these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on earth. Faith and hope always look forward to the future. They're about believing with full confidence and assurance that God will be faithful to deliver on all of his promises, even if delivery of those promises don't arrive until after we're dead. And believing wholeheartedly that God is a promise keeper is why the men and women named in this chapter, like Abel and Enoch and Noah and Sarah and Abraham and Rahab and so many more, lived passionately, and they lived radically, and they lived purposely. Think about this. 1 Corinthians chapter 13 is the love chapter. You need to have a Barry White voice in order. How many people here don't have a clue who Barry White is? Anybody? Oh, how about one person? All right. Google it, because he's got this sexy voice that he did all these love songs in the probably late or early 70s or something like that, you know, the love. Okay. Anyways, the first half of chapter 13 is about love. And then it gets into talking about what it's going to be like when, at the end of all things, when eternity shows up, okay? So you can read about all of that. You know, now we see as dimly through a mirror, but then we'll see face to face. All these things that will happen once God shows up and we're in eternity with him. But the last verse, verse 13 says, now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. Have you ever stopped long enough to analyze why is love greater than faith and hope? These three remain. What do they remain for? Well, we need these three right now. We need faith to look forward to something. We need hope. We need to look forward to something. We need love. Love is the thing that binds us all together. Those three remain right now, but the greatest is love, because when you get to eternity, you won't need faith. You won't need hope. Trust me. When you're in God's presence, you won't need to say, I just need more faith. I just need to hope. Oh God, show up. Oh God, pay my bills. I need some bread. I need something. You won't be thinking that anymore. It's just going to be one long, eternal love fest. Faith and hope are always looking forward. I mentioned to Viktor Frankl earlier in this message. Viktor Frankl was an Austrian Jew. He ended up in Auschwitz. Before that, he was a neurologist and a psychiatrist by trade. And so he spent a lot of time observing, just watching how some people, the people that weren't put in the chambers or the gas ovens, why some of those people survived in the camps until the liberation, and others just gave up hope and died. And so in Man's Search for Meaning, Frankl mentions one particular year that a rumor spread around Auschwitz that they would be released that year before Christmas. And when Christmas came and went, more people died in the next several weeks than ever before. They simply gave up hope. And this is what he writes. He says, the prisoner who had lost faith in the future, his future was doomed. With his loss of belief in the future, he also lost his spiritual hold. He let himself decline and became subject to mental and physical decay. Usually this happened quite suddenly in the form of a crisis, the symptoms of which were familiar to the experienced camp inmate. We all feared that moment, not for ourselves, which would have been pointless, but for our friends. Usually it began with the prisoner refusing one morning to get dressed and wash or to go out in the parade grounds. No entreaties, no blows, no threats had any effect anymore. He just lay there, hardly moving. And if this crisis was brought about by an illness, he refused to be taken to the sick bay or to do anything to help himself. He simply gave up, and there he remained lying in his own excreta, and nothing bothered him anymore. Wow. $40,000 Americans took their lives last year. 1 million people in the world. Frankl says those who stayed alive until the liberation were able to find even the smallest reason to stay alive, to see a loved one once again, to resume a career, to recover something of value that was left behind. Hope hope in a promising future is the fuel for living a radical and passionate life today. Without hope, there's no passion. There's no spark. And all the men and women listed in Hebrews chapter 11 lived passionately and radically and purposefully because they had faith in the future, confidence and assurance that God is a promise keeper. And because of their faith, they all had great stories to tell along the way about the incredible work of grace that God was doing in their lives. Faith is about hope and storytelling. In fact, there's a story in John chapter 9 that I love. And it's about a man who was born blind. So he's an adult, right? Means he's been blind for at least a couple decades, probably more. And in Jewish thinking back then, not biblical thinking, right? But in Jewish thinking back then, if someone was afflicted like this, then someone's sin had to be at the root of why this happened. And so the disciples asked Jesus the question, who sinned? Was it the man? Or was it his parents? But listen how Jesus answers this question. This is John chapter 9, verse 3. Neither this man nor his parents sinned. And then let this just soak in. This happened. This man is blind so that the works of God might be displayed in him. Wow. It seems as if this man was born blind so that God could perform some kind of a work of grace in his life. In other words, God was using his blindness to work this grace out. What's happened in your life where Jesus might say the same thing about you? Well, on this particular day, Jesus heals this man. And because Jesus healed him on the Sabbath, which according to Jewish thinking, not the Bible again, Jewish thinking was a sin, the Jewish leaders declare that Jesus is actually the real sinner in this story. And so they bring the man in and they begin to interrogate him to say, is Jesus a sinner? And after what seems like a long interrogation, the man finally says, look, I don't know whether Jesus is a sinner or not. I just met the guy. But I could tell you this. I used to be blind, but now I can see. And I bet every day for the rest of this guy's life, he told that story over and over again. Hey, you're not going to believe it. But just yesterday, I was blind, and today I can, and now I can see. Hey, a week ago, I was blind, and today I can see. That's his story. What's your story? Because we all have a story to tell. I almost lost the most beautiful woman in this world. Now she thinks I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread. Boy, did I dupe her. Jonathan Rabbi Sachs, again, says it so well. If we believe, listen to this. If we believe we are here, and the worship team can come out. If we believe we are here for a reason, then there is a tikkun. We use this word a lot. There's a phrase in Jewish thinking. It's called tikkun olam. It literally means the healing or the mending of the world. It's an obligation to be a part of that, right? And so Rabbi Sachs says, if we believe we're here for a reason, how many believe you're here for a reason, by the way? All right, that's good. Because a lot of people just think they're just breathing oxygen until their last breath. If we believe that we're here for a reason, then there is a tikkun, a mending, a healing that only we can perform, a fragment of light only we can redeem, an act of kindness or courage or generosity or hospitality, even a word of encouragement or a smile, only we can perform because we are here in this place at this time, facing this person at this very moment in their lives. That is meaning, my friends, right there. Belonging, connecting, and responsible for the whole of humanity. Purpose, using that work of grace, that gift that we have to steward it. And faith, having the hope that God is a promise keeper and just letting it all out and telling the story of God's work of grace in our lives. I used to be this way, and now I'm this way. You don't have to be very complicated about it. The people that we meet, the choices we make, the lives we live, none of it is coincidental. And they're there so that the works of God might be displayed in our lives. And you never know how your story is going to impact someone else. So hopefully you got one of these cards. I don't even know if I got one. I do. Did y'all get one of these? It says a bigger story on it. Who doesn't have one? Hey, ushers, can we get, keep your hand up, okay? But keep listening to me, all right? Because I want to explain what these are for. It says, live a bigger story. We've been trying to do practical applications at the end of these messages. And what I want you to do with this is I want you to put it somewhere where you'll see it every day. Okay, here's where I put it because, sad to say, I'm on this most of my life. So it's on my little phone case. Live a bigger story. And then got hand up, raise them up a little higher so she can see. Oh, look at you. What were you ushers doing? Darn ushers. Actually, give them a hand because they... It's not easy to be nice every week. All right, so here's what I'd like you to do. Would you first and foremost, would you really think about being connected to the whole of humanity, that everyone is your brother and sister, all right? I get all the other stuff. You know, someone's going to come up to me and say, yeah, but what about this and what about this? Just forget all of that for right now. We're one blood. And would you ask God to put you in the path of somebody, and particularly somebody that maybe you wouldn't normally consider yourself a brother or sister to, okay? I don't know who that might be for you, but I bet you do. And when God puts you in that path, and it's going to happen because you're going to go, oh, holy, you know what? This is that moment. I'm going to trust that God's going to give you the opportunity to say, hey, can I just share something with you really quick? I used to be like this, and now I'm like this, and I don't know why, but I feel like you need to hear that. You don't have to get all spiritual. In fact, don't. Don't get all religious and spiritual. Just talk like you would if you're at your work where they restrict you to do stuff like that. Just be a real person. And then we'd love to hear from you about what God's doing, not just today, but all the weeks that we've given some applications. Next week, we're hoping to create some space where you'll have some opportunity to share some of the things that God has done in this home series and these practical applications. Okay, would you do that? All right, let's stand.